April 1865. And Five Forks has two names synonymous for Gettysburg here: Governor K. Warren and Pickett. At the end of this, neither one of them would have a very good reputation, and both of them would pretty much lose their careers here at the Battle of Five Forks. April 1st, 1865. General Robert E. Lee has placed General Pickett in charge here at Five Forks. And at this location, there's about 10,000 Confederate soldiers under his charge. But General Pickett's not here. He's about 2 miles down the road at a shad bake at someone's property. And it's in such a place that an acoustic barrier happens because of the trees and the hills. And he doesn't even hear what's happening over here. The Union Army is approaching this location, but they're making mistakes left and right. Crawford's men are off to the right-hand side, and they're not even in location where they're supposed to be. They're actually coming around the rear of the Confederate Army. Luck for them. And then Governor K. Warren is slow to come up. But everything converges here at the Five Forks and turns into a major Union victory and the Confederate Army on retreat to Appomattox. Now for a little battlefield orientation. I'm here at the Five Forks location. You can see all the roads forking in together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now directly across the street here, this line that runs in this direction, if you can imagine following this direction, this is where the Confederate forces are. This is Pegram's line right here that I'm standing in right now. And directly out in front of me, Sheridan's men were approaching from the south. So they're coming up in this direction, but they're coming stretched all the way across that direction. And they're in a U shape headed towards us here in this position. Now, way off over in this direction over here, Crawford's men in that direction, they actually come out and about and end up in the wrong location. They pass Mumford, and Mumford retreats back. And as they're going back around that direction, they end up somewhere on the left side of us here in this position and end up in the fields behind. General George Pickett is down that road on a piece of property having a shad bake with his officers. And the majority of the people that were supposed to be in charge out here at the time are back there. They did not leave anybody in charge over here. So the men are out here struggling on their own, and the position is so quiet back there that they can't hear the cannons going off and the muskets firing. And there's roughly about 10,000 men out here fighting in this area that are Confederate soldiers, all lined up back through here and all this property. The force that's approaching them is anywhere between 2 and 3 times their size. And there's even a sign out here saying that the Union forces were 50,000 versus 10,000. Most of the estimates I've seen online and through historical text are more like 30 to 10, 30 to 12. The signs out here talk about Colonel William R.J. Pegram, who was actually stationed in this location at the time with his artillery pieces. And as Phil Sheridan was approaching this area with dismounted cavalry, they were attacked from the front in this direction here. They had put up earthworks out here. They were crudely built, which means they weren't fully prepared for the fight in this location. And this location actually collapses in the afternoon. Well, in the afternoon, so does Mr. Pegram. He goes down shot, mortally wounded in the side somewhere out here on this field, and dies, succumbs to his wounds. Mr. Pegram actually fought with the Army of Northern Virginia through some of the biggest campaigns, and survived all of those fights, and only to die just a few miles from his actual home here at the Five Forks. So if you're out here April 1st of 1865 and you're a Confederate soldier on this line, you're kind of at your wit's end. You're starving, you're hungry every single day. You're fighting every single day out here for your life. And the situation looks bleak. The Union Army is pounding away at this position, every position across the front, trying to find a weak spot to create the break. They find it here in Five Forks Battlefield. And the position that I'm standing on right now is that position I talked about earlier where William Pegram died, the 23-year-old colonel who was called the Boy Colonel, out here on this field. This location, they withstood a lot of damage until sometime in the afternoon. And then by the dark hours here, they could tell that the fight was about to be up. They were almost completely surrounded. And so instead of being completely surrounded and having to surrender, they were given the order to fall back and retreat from this location. With that goes the South Side Railroad. When that railroad's gone, there's no longer a way for supplies to go trickling into the Confederate Army, which once again at that time, these soldiers are already starving. They are not receiving rations at the rate that they normally would if they were out marching through Virginia and other locations. So once that railroad's gone and there's no supplies and there's no way to protect this town, then that's it. So they have to go ahead and retreat out of here and try to find another location. Robert E. Lee sends word to the Capitol to go ahead and close down shop, and they head out towards Appomattox. So it's about 4:15 p.m. on April 1st, 1865, and near the Gravelly Run Methodist Episcopal Church, the order was given for the division to attack. General Philip Sheridan, Governor K. Warren, and Colonel Horace Porter of General Grant's staff rode out the front line. Union skirmishers drove in the Confederate outpost. Ayres was told by a staff officer that there were indications of the enemy on the left. Well, Ayres alerted his reserve brigade commander, Brevet Brigadier General Frederick Winthrop, to be ready to bring his brigade forward. Confederate General Matthew Ransom's brigade began to fire on Ayres' division after it crossed the White Oak Road, which is right here behind me. As you can see there in the picture. Warren later recalled that Ransom's brigade was in a thick belt of woods, which disrupted their aim and reduced initial Union casualties. Ayres realized the situation and changed his front to the left to face the return of Southerners' line. The movement opened a space in the line, which Ayres filled with Winthrop's brigade. Ayres' men faltered briefly when they became exposed to closer and more accurate firing from Ransom's brigade. Sheridan rode along the battle line shouting encouragement. Ayres' men would take this position, key to the entire Confederate line. Over 1,000 prisoners and 8 battle flags. Among the Union casualties, however, was General Winthrop, who was mortally wounded. Somewhere out here. Now I'm going to see if I can't walk out here for a little piece to see if I can't find these Confederate earthworks. They're supposed to be directly out front here, and I think I might see some out there in the bushes. It's quite the walk out here. There they are. So this is some of the original earthworks here on the ground of that Confederate left flank that was attacked on April 1st, 1865 during the Battle of Five Forks. It stretches on off, as you can tell there, off in that direction. And you can kind of see them zigging a little bit, zigging and zagging off here. This is pretty amazing stuff. Of course, over time they've kind of withered away with erosion. It's always amazing to get out into these woods here at these parks, these national parks, and see stuff like this behind me that still exists. It was put here 160 years, almost 160 years ago, by the hands of soldiers. Built trenches, dirt earthworks that are still existing today. I try to stay off of them so that they don't further erode because of me. But this is pretty amazing stuff out here. You just got to make sure to steer clear of any private property, however, when you come out to locations like this. But here in this location, like I said earlier, Winthrop actually was mortally wounded. And the Confederates were here across the White Oak Road in this position as they were being attacked by Sheridan's men and by the men we just discussed coming across that road. And this was the real left flank at Five Forks. And it's amazing. This stuff is still here. You can kind of see here on the ground and right out front there, there's large lines of earthworks. It looks as though it must be the angled portion of the earthworks that ran adjacent to the road. Pretty neat. So, as you can tell by looking at this sign that was placed here, the portion of earthworks that I was actually looking at is that angle portion that comes back here. That's where we were just a minute ago off in the woods. Along the road would have been earthworks thrown up in that direction. And this is the Five Fork area that we were at earlier where Pegram was killed. And then it continues off in that road, and then there are more earthworks going back towards where the visitor center is. And this is the location at 4:15 p.m. where Major General Gouverneur K. Warren's Union 5th Corps swarmed across the open fields to my right, which is directly behind me actually, based on where I'm facing. Two federal divisions moved too far north and missed the Confederate lines altogether, and one division of 3,100 men struck the Confederates here. And this was Brigadier General Matthew Ransom's North Carolina Brigade was here. They were the ones that were resisting in this location. but the Federals rolled forward and vaulted over the earthworks. Now, according to Major General Fitzhugh Lee, when they moved into this location, what he said was that when they moved here towards Five Forks, they were not expecting any attack that afternoon so far as he knew. He says, "Our throwing up works and taking position were simply general matters of military precaution." So the fact that they actually put things up here as what they normally do is probably the only reason why the resistance here held as long as it did, because had they come to this location and not put up these earthworks quickly, they wouldn't have had anything to hide behind. Now here at number 2 location, to point out some battlefield orientation, directly down this road going that way is where the Five Forks is located. Now from right about there down that way, Phil Sheridan and his men are attacking in this direction here. Now going back towards here, Warren's infantry, Gouverneur K. Warren, is actually back over here, off in this direction and reaching up here. Now, based on the attack that happened out here, there's a lot of controversy about Gouverneur K. Warren's position here, whether or not he had been delayed, whether or not he was faulty or at fault for what he's done here. And as a result, Sheridan is angry at his top. After this battle, Gouverneur K. Warren suffers greatly, and his career never gets back on track. And this is pretty much what destroys him here. General Pickett, on the other hand, the person for which the charge at Gettysburg is named, suffers an even worse fate here at Five Forks, with his name attached to this fight here. This location turns out to be pretty much the nail in the coffin. As they lose control of the South Side Railroad, they have to back out of this position and give up both Petersburg and Richmond and head toward Appomattox, which wasn't even the goal. Appomattox was never the goal. They end up there hoping to get some supplies and end up having to surrender what was left of the Army of Northern Virginia. Now, unfortunately, at the Battle of Five Forks, the location out there really isn't all that great as far as earthworks are concerned, and identifiable things on the ground for you to see. But if you travel down White Oak Road not too far from Five Forks battlefield itself, you'll find the battlefield of White Oak Road. And out here at this location, there is a pretty sizable set, if you can see here off in this direction, of earthworks. Now, those earthworks will give you a real good visual for the type of earthworks that were in place during the Battle of Five Forks, which is why I'm over here right now to show this off. And places like this are preserved by the American Battlefield Trust. These locations are bought up by the trust, and after a lot of hard work, dedication, and efforts put in place, interpretive signs and trails are put out here for you to be able to experience the battlefield and understand what took place out here. Now, unfortunately, out here at this location, the benches are worn out and falling apart. The interpretive signs are faded so bad you can't read them. It takes a lot of donations and a lot of hard work to keep these places up, and unfortunately, this is the condition that some of these places end up in. It's kind of hard to tell with the angle of this camera, but this is a large earthwork coming up here and then it angles back in that direction. And just directly out here is the White Oak Road that I was talking about. Now the battle that took place out here at this location, at the White Oak Road site, actually happened just a day or two before the conflict at Five Forks. And it was involving much of the same people, especially Warren. This was a pretty pivotal point here too. Grant could smell the blood in the water, and he knew that there was going to be a time when he was going to push that army out of his earthworks, his heavily fortified trenches, and he kept probing the lines and pushing to see if there was a way to get around or to get to where he could take control of that last supply line trickling into the army. Robert E. Lee knew that, so Lee sends Pickett down to Five Forks with his men, and the rest is history. I'm out here on battlefield stop number 5 at the Five Forks battlefield, and this place is significant because it's roughly the location where General George Pickett was attending a shad bake at the time of the battle. When this was going down, he had no idea what was happening because of an acoustic shadow. It blocked out the noise, so he couldn't really tell. Some people theorize that had he been there, it might have made a difference. But most historians agree that based on the terrain and where he was at, it wouldn't have made a difference at all. It's a very busy road out here. Now also off in this general direction to my right-hand side, Mr. Crawford, the Union Army, he got one of the luckiest breaks he ever had during his career. He pushed his men off to the side and approached the Confederate Army and actually missed the direction where he was supposed to go. And he ends up somewhere near the rear of where the Confederate Army is. And across these fields in front of me here, Crawford's men actually push up from the rear towards the Confederate soldiers who are at Five Forks. And it pretty much pushes the Confederacy to the brink here at the Five Forks location. The Confederates have to leave their position because of the fighting that happens here and because of the position that they're in. And so they're no longer able to hold it, and that one supply line that they do have here that's very critical to their army has to be given up. And at that point, General Lee knows that he has no other option, and he has to give up these lines, evacuate the towns, and evacuate Richmond. And then that's when the chase is on, just a few days later, towards Appomattox Courthouse. Directly out in front of me are the fields that Crawford's men would have crossed over, coming up towards the rear of the Confederacy here at Five Forks. It's also said that Captain James Breckinridge was killed out here somewhere near a small hill and a stream, and his body was buried on this property. But a memorial marker was placed in Longwood Cemetery in Bedford, Virginia by his family during the 1950s. And then at one point in time, there were remains found out here that suggested that they were the remains of Mr. Breckinridge himself. So after the research indicated that it belonged to Captain Breckinridge, and consulting with the soldier's family, the decision was made to rebury the remains where they were found. So there's no identifier or anything out here to point out to where exactly it is, but he's still buried out here on this field today. It's been an absolute blast taking you guys out to Five Forks today to check out the battlefield here and to see what's left of it. Unfortunately, the visitor center was closed, and it seems like it's been closed for a while. So I couldn't get inside to see anything in there or talk about the museum or the national park and what the national park does here to preserve this battlefield. But come on out, check it out for yourself, see history out here at Five Forks. Until next time, this is History with Waffles.